Mike Freeman, welcome to Out of the Hourglass. How you doing this afternoon?
I am doing fantastic, Molly. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here. I do feel like it's long overdue. It's funny. As I start bringing on more Summit members onto the episode, I feel like these folks should have been here years ago on the podcast. So it's finally time to have you here. So thank you for being
You
game
bet.
to.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So before we jump, we got, a lot to talk about. You've got an interesting and just kind of unique story and you're involved in a lot of things. And I want our listeners to kind of hear about that. But before we do so, for those listeners who don't know who you are, please tell us who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Mike Freeman. I'm one of the founding owners of Mike's Quality Painting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We also spun that into One Day Concrete Coatings in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then my wife and I have MMJ Enterprises, which is a real estate investment, primarily manages commercial real estate, mostly stuff that we occupy with the painting businesses. And then I'm partnered with my brother in Freeman Family Rentals, which is an Airbnb business. And then now I'm a new summit coach. So I've kind of got a lot of things going on here right now.
You sure do. You sure do. You're a busy guy. You clearly are an entrepreneur at heart, one that kind of thrives off of being busy, I would imagine, and creating things. One, have you always been that way? And two, when I say entrepreneurial spirit, what does that mean to you?
I would say I've always felt entrepreneurial, right? I've always wanted to sort of carve my own path, figure out, ways to make money or ways to make a living that were not just working a 9 to 5 job.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up that way, if I'm being honest. My dad was a general contractor. He was a home builder, and his dad was a really entrepreneurial guy, was a general contractor and a paving contractor and owned apartments and
Wow.
things like that. So sort of always in my family, it was always sort of talked about, like, at least with the men in my family on that side, they were always like, you should work for yourself. And my dad used to have a saying, I don't want a job I don't want to work where my job is only as secure as my boss's mood on Monday morning. And that was always sort of his feeling around working for somebody. And so I think
Yeah.
early on, I was always sort of like, we worked with my dad as kids when he was building houses and kind of grew up in that and thought about how do you work and make money for yourself. And so, I think back about it, like when you asked about this, if I would come on to this, my brother and I actually started our first business together when I was 11, mowing lawns.
Wow.
And I sort of laugh at, saying, mowing lawns, right? Because a lot of kids mow lawns, and that's how we got into it. We lived in a really densely populated neighborhood in San Antonio, Texas, and we wanted some money to go to the movies, I think, and my parents wouldn't give it to us. And so a neighbor next door said, well, I used to cut grass, so maybe we can get a few people to let us mow their lawn. And so we went around and talked. Well, within about, I want to say 2 weeks, me and my brother had cut out the neighbor because he wasn't that hardworking. And we were seriously mowing lawns. I think we could mow 3 lawns after school every day. And we would mow, I think, 6 lawns a day on Saturday and Sunday. When I was 11 years old, we were earning more money than I could have earned working at any fast food restaurant or any sort of thing like that. I remember one time my dad got mad at us because we wouldn't watch my kid brother because we were busy mowing lawns. And so he came and took all of our lawn mowing equipment. And we were on a job. We were mowing somebody's lawn, and my dad pulls up and says, that's it, you're done, taking it all back. You won't do your chores. You won't work around the house anymore. So he took all of the lawn mowing equipment, which was his. And the guy that we were mowing his grass for said, well, gosh, guys, how much cash do you have? And so we started counting it up, and we had enough money to go buy a new riding lawnmower with a basket to pull all of the grass clippings and our weed trimmer and all the stuff. We could replace all the equipment. And so we went home to go do that, to go buy all the equipment. And my dad saw what we had done, and he was like, never mind, here's the stuff back. Just go back to your job, whatever. So, from kind of that time, I always thought this is cool to be able to work for yourself and figure out how to make money. And so,
Yeah. You have a challenge, your equipment gets taken away. You look at what you've made and what you can spend to buy new equipment. You from a young age, you were adapting to the challenges that come in business.
yeah, it was always fun. It's one of those little stories you remember in your life. Like, that is kind of crazy for an 11-year-old. I look at
Yeah.
my kids, and they're not, they're not that engaged. So
No, no,
we make
no,
it
and
too.
it's funny when you see, kids coming down the street, walking the lawnmower and doing things here and there, but you guys clearly had set up, then having the set number you could do every day after school, the set number you were doing on Saturdays. There was a plan in place. You weren't just randomly looking to mow lawns. Like you had a following.
Once we figured out we could do it and make money, I mean, we were setting people up on recurring schedules. And I'm like,
Look
I
at
wonder if I hadn't moved from there, if I'd be a landscaper right now instead of a painter.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have been. It could have been Mike's Quality Landscaping.
There you go.
There you go. From the Mike's Quality Landscaping days, now to where you are. Obviously, you just kind of share, what you have kind of going on the table right now. Clearly, a lot of things. have you identified what are the ventures worth pursuing for you? Is it passion driven? Is it opportunity driven? Value driven?
It's more opportunity driven, I think, than anything. I think early on when we started the painting business in 2011, one of our original goals was to have a commercial professional business that would operate without us,
Hmm.
right? So trying to figure out how do we have systems in place and management in place and things so that the business doesn't consume all of our life. And so, we've sort of worked and strived as from the time we created the business all the way through to try and have that be the case. And so then you start doing that. You get yourself out of the hourglass in your business and the way that you're making a living, and you start finding yourself with more time, and then that leads to other things. So it's like real estate and these, the painting and concrete company, concrete coating companies are really the thing that I see the most. It's the thing that I get the most enjoyment out of.
Okay.
So there's really a passion to it at this point, but it wasn't always that way. I mean, when we started the painting business, we just needed to make a living, right? Miriam and I had
Right.
two little kids, and my mom wanted to start the business, and I had just broken up from a business with my brother, and so it was sort of like, okay, we got to figure out how to feed ourselves, and
Hmm.
so that's all encompassing. But as we set that as the vision early on of like, I want to build a business that can operate without us, you sort of start into that track. And like I say, as it's grown and developed, we've bought real estate and done some things that now actually produce income for us, and you start seeing like, wow, that's an opportunity, that's something I could do. And so I feel like one thing sort of trails to another. Like it started with the painting business, and then we started doing some concrete coating as sort of a division of the painting business, and then realized we should separate those and make them their own entity. And then the
Hmm.
same sort of thing happens with real estate. And so, it just sort of spins and goes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, and it seems pretty natural how we've seen a lot of businesses within the trades also kind of spin into real estate as kind of a side, or other, hustle or things that they're working. I mean, you're a part of the real estate peer group. We had Dan Brady on here
Yeah.
about a month
Yeah.
ago, how he's built that business. That for him is his passion. He's got the painting business.
You
Seems to
bet.
be running like a well-oiled machine, but where he really loves to spend his time is on the Airbnb side. And
Yeah.
so it kind of, that the painting business also allows him to fuel the time and money towards the Airbnb, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, and for Dan, it's a little bit different, I think, because he absolutely loves providing this killer guest experience. Real estate for
Totally.
him is not just about real estate and the dollars and cents and how can I make money with it. It's about,
Yeah.
like, fuels this really creative passion for him around creating exceptional guest experiences, I think, and
Hmm.
these themed houses, and everything sort of works and blends well together for him. I don't think I feel that way about real estate in terms of it
Hmm.
being like a passion of mine for the tenant experience or the guest experience. It's more about the dollars and cents. Like, how can you invest in things that are going to grow in value and benefit your tax position? And there's a lot of intrinsic value to real estate that I look at and say,
Totally.
this could be just a really cool thing that would carry us into retirement. When Miriam and I started, we always said, I want to figure out how we're going to retire without selling our business. I never want to be in the
Uh,
situation where I have to sell our business. That doesn't mean I wouldn't sell it,
yep.
but I don't want that to be the exit strategy of like, well, we own this business, and that's so we've always thought about, trying to be responsible, right? And save for retirement and put money aside, and some of those kinds of things. Well, real estate to me sort of scratches that itch of like, at some point in our lives, if we invest today and you can use the power of leverage and financing and appreciation to sort of build a net worth and an income base that would sustain beyond the painting business. Painting and service businesses are fantastic, but you have to kill what you're going to eat today, right? We're always
Yep.
hunting. We're always trying to figure out how to make it work. And I feel a little bit uneasy sometimes of like, the years can really flux, you
Oh
can have
yeah.
a couple of really fantastic years, and then something triggers in the economy and people stop buying, and you're scrambling and reworking it. And so there's excitement to the painting business, in that volatility, but there's also a lot of uneasiness.
Yeah.
And so finding things that are a little bit more stable feels nice.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I mean, it clearly shows you've thought big picture. And I love that you thought about, basically, you started with thinking about the end in mind. Like, if we're going to do this business, what do we want it to look like when we're ready to retire? And if we don't want to sell it, what do we think the things that we got to start doing now when we're years from that time frame to
Sure.
give us options? So you've been building value for years and years and years now, which is pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So I had a business coach early on. I've always kind of been a big fan of business coaching. And the first business
Hmm.
coach we had as we were forming it, he encouraged us to read the E-Myth and to think about that. And he said, you've got to start with the end in mind. You have to think about what's your exit strategy going to be. You don't want to build a business that's going to own you like a slave. and we can fall into that trap really easy. And I've seen that happen to a lot of people. And so, the goal was just to think through, what does it take to actually make the business serve what we want and still be
Yeah.
able to provide for a lot of other people, right? Because, the business doesn't just exist to serve me. It actually serves a whole lot of other people in
My
some really
gosh, yes.
fantastic ways, right? And so, but trying to be thoughtful about that, of like, what is the exit? What is the end? What are we trying to actually accomplish here? Has
Mhm.
sort of always been at the front of my mind.
Which means you're ahead of the game because there's so many people who do this for years and they're at the point where they're ready to retire and they don't know what's happening next. And that's a scary place to be.
Yeah, I think it would be a scary place. We still have a
Yeah.
lot of time. I don't want to say we've done it perfectly. It's not a brag, right? We screw this up all the time.
Business is messy. So we always say.
Yeah, and it can be for sure, but I have always sort of thought, like, I don't want to end up in the spot where I'm, at the end of my life. Like, I had a friend that his dad owned a painting business, and they were a huge successful company when I was learning to paint.
Mhm.
And somewhere along the way, I mean, they were successful back in the day, and somewhere along the way, he wasn't paying his taxes. He
Oh,
wound up with tax levies. He wound up with 2 knee replacements at the same time that his hip went out. He ended up shutting down the business. He effectively lived out his last years in a house that he inherited from his mom because the IRS couldn't take the inheritance. If they could have taken the inheritance, they
jeez.
would have taken that as well. And I remember as a young guy coming up and seeing them, and they were always out on 4-wheeler trips and lots of cash, and everything looked fantastic. It was this big business with 20 or 30 guys working for them all the time, and they were really somebody, and you'd see them around, and to see that be the end was always shocking to me. Like,
Yeah.
we're playing with fire. If we don't manage it right, if we don't think about what we're doing and keep it straight, it can come back and bite you. And I never wanted to be in that situation. So
It's so true. There's always more behind the scenes. It's like it's the same thing when you're looking at social media or Instagram. Like don't fully judge what you're seeing by the reality of what actually is, because there can be mess behind the pretty pictures or the brand that exists.
absolutely.
We talked a little bit about, challenges or, business being messy. You
Mhm.
must have had some setbacks along the way in the building of these businesses.
Never.
None at all. Never.
No,
Is there one that like stands out to you so much that like maybe shifted how you now approach business itself, or just kind of changed how your response to things?
yeah, there's one significant that really always jumps out and will always jump out at me is so, before we started Mike's Quality Painting, I was in business with my brother. And as that split and came to an end, we haven't spoken in 14 years. And I've missed out on his kids growing, right? Like,
Hmm.
we were close. We started our lawnmower business together. And so to see that business can wind up driving a wedge in between you and your family in a significant way, that's always stuck with me. Like, that's hard to talk about.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
and so that changed my mantra about, I want to be a good partner above all else for everybody that I do business with. If there's a scenario where I say, if I cut them out a little bit, or I take advantage in this way or that way, I'll make more money, or it'll have a better outcome for me, but it could cost me the relationship with that person. Hands down, no questions. I'm not doing that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The relationship always to me matters more, and being a good partner matters more to me than any money we could ever make, or any chance that we would lose money or lose the whole thing, right? The relationships to me matter a lot more than the business itself. And I think that's the hardest lesson I think I've ever learned. It's just that you have to be really mindful. I love partnerships. I love collaborating with people. I mean, I'm in
Hmm.
a partnership with my younger brother in our rental business. I'm in a partnership with my wife in
Right?
our other stuff. My mom was a founding partner. We had to work
Yeah.
through the exit of her business, or, her through the business, and all of these things come up, and having that blow up with me and my brother has really shaped how I view partnerships and how I view the relationships with people that we do business with. You know what I mean? To me, it's way more important than the dollars and cents.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience. And I mean, to now see and treat that was so delicately. I love that you haven't shied away from working with partnerships, as even though that didn't go the way that you would have hoped.
Sure.
But the reality is, yeah, family business dynamics, it is a delicate balance. And there is no kind of work on it, set it and forget it. It is a constant thing we are having to work on. And I know, you guys, I look at ourselves as a family business. I mean, nothing is ever perfect, but when you all operate with the same goal in mind and the intention first behind it, then it can work. But Brian always says the family must serve the business, or the business must serve the family. The family cannot serve the business. And if it's happening the opposite direction, then there needs to be a timeout and a real hard talk about, like, does this make sense for family and business to be involved? But yeah, I love that you have continued to forge down that path, now kind of making that really intentional about how you treat that relationship.
It's super important to me. Like I just wouldn't, I'd never want to repeat that, and so I think there's ways to mitigate it. I think, you just have to make sure that you're showing up to be your very best, and being willing to extend a lot of grace if somebody is not. And the reality of it is, I feel like we all have sort of seasons in our lives, right? Where sometimes I'm showing up and I'm really giving it. I'm doing better than anybody that I'm in partnership with, right? I'm
Yep.
really bringing my very best, and they're not. And then it flips. And sometimes I'm really not, and I'm distracted and disgruntled and whatever. And they have to pick me up, right? And so that's the give
Yeah.
and take. And that's the thing I love about partnerships, honestly, is that you have the strength of multiple people. If everybody's vision and intentionality is aligned, if one person is down, the other person can pick up the slack a little bit. Or you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you bring together this collaboration of enthusiasm for the business and different roles and different strengths and weaknesses that you can all work off of to make it really work and grow. And that's what I love about partnerships. Get the right partnership arrangements. I think it works beautiful.
Yeah, no, that's the right word though, the right partnership. And it's understanding, what are the boundaries of that, and clarity, I guess, around partnerships too, kind of from the onset, so that there are no assumptions or miscommunications.
I think with that, being able to be clear and vulnerable about what are your weaknesses, what are the things that, so if I'm entering into a partnership with somebody, like what are they bringing to the table that I need? And what am I bringing to the table that they might need? And how do we get clarity around that? Because if we get into a partnership together and you suddenly expect me to be something that I'm not,
Hmm.
you're going to be left hopelessly dissatisfied with the arrangement. And the
Right,
same
right.
is true with anybody that you get as a partner. So as I think about those things, I get really clear. Like with my brother now, we got pretty clear about if we're going to be in partnership together, if we're going to do business together, what are the things that he brings to the table? What are the things that I bring to the table? How do we help each other and prop each other up so that we can both bring our best and be in our best roles? And I think being intentional about that really helps.
Absolutely. A question I have for you about being an entrepreneur and the approach to risk is, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, I think you are naturally inclined to take risks.
Sure.
You don't start a business without taking a risk. But also, when you're in a partnership, obviously, you have to kind of understand the risk intention or willingness of also a partner who's,
Right.
in that business with you. So, from a solo standpoint, from an independent standpoint, how do you approach risk? And has that changed over the years?
Yeah, truthfully, it hasn't changed much over the years. I'm not at all risk adverse. I'm like
Hmm.
super risk tolerant. It doesn't scare me. I feel like at this point there's very little that I'm going to do that I can't come back from if I screw up. So I do try to, I guess I should say it this way. When we started the business, right? Like we had to burn the boats when we crossed the shore, right? Like there was no going back. It was the only way we were going to get the business to work. And that felt really risky. But the reality of it is we always knew if it failed or something went wrong, we would hold the family together, and we were all in on it. Risk today, I mean, I try to be mindful that risks exist and things could go wrong, but I try not to freeze with risk. It doesn't prevent me from making a decision that
Hmm.
needs to be made or that I think has a potential to be a good decision. I'm willing to gamble. I'm willing to bet and work through it. And it's sort of funny because Miriam is not real risk tolerant. She doesn't like risk at all. And so,
Yeah.
when you talk about intentionality of what we each bring to the table, like Miriam, anybody that knows her sweet spot is not taking big risks. Her sweet spot is like, let's be really stable and really thoughtful about how every little thing is going to go. And she wants to know every detail and how this is going to play out. And I'm like, come on, let's just get moving. A perfect plan
Yeah.
tomorrow is way worse than an okay plan today. We'll figure it out as we go. Let's do this.
Let's
And
build a
so
bridge as we walk on it.
that's right, and it kind of works for us, right? Because she actually helps ground me. She gets to go, hey, Mike, time out. Like, have you really thought about this, and this? And that's one of the strengths
Yeah.
she brings to the partnership, right? Is that she's thoughtful and she's careful and she can slow me down some. But at the same token, I can recognize that if she didn't have somebody pulling and finding opportunities and visioning what could be, she might not be as far, right? So we counterbalance each
Yeah.
other a little bit, and it's good for both of us.
Would you say you two are like the true dynamic of like visionary integrator, that relationship?
1,000%.
Yeah.
1000%. When we read the book Rocket Fuel 5 or 6 years ago, I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, that's me and Miriam.
Yeah.
It
There we
finally
are.
clicked. It was like, wow, this is perfect. And then it's funny because it used to really frustrate. I used to be like, what's the problem? And it really frustrated her. And
Yeah.
reading that book and sort of thinking about each of our roles, it really clicked like, this is a good thing. And we can both acknowledge each other's strengths and how our weaknesses in the situation are benefited by our partner's strengths, if that
Right.
makes
Yeah. The business will be better off with
That's
the
right.
two of us having these strengths and collaborating together and
Yep.
bringing both to the table. In any other partnerships that you have had, how does risk, is it the same situation, being a little bit more risk tolerant or risk averse?
Yeah, my brother, who's, we've got the rental business, he's a lot more conscientious and risk adverse and doesn't want to get out over our skis and, kind of micro analyzes every situation and I think can almost freeze, right? He'll overthink it and
Yeah.
it'll prevent him from diving in. And so I'm always pulling him along like, come on, this deal works. I like the numbers. Let's make this happen. Come on, let's get it together. And so I can kind of, we can kind of push and pull each other a little bit, which is good. That's kind of what I want in
Yeah.
partnership. I've realized with my relationship with Miriam and our working together in the business, I mean, it's something that I need because left to my own devices, I could really go out over my skis.
Yeah.
And so I like having somebody that's willing to rein me back in a little bit, that can be
Yep.
comfortable telling me like, I'm not comfortable with these numbers you're putting in front of me, or I'm not comfortable with the risk that we could face over here. It really helps balance me out.
Some good checks and balances in place with,
Sure.
with growth in mind.
Yeah.
With growth
Yeah,
in
I mean,
mind.
I work best with people that are growth minded. You have to want to extend yourself a little bit. Or what are we doing here, right? I mean, business, like managing day-to-day business and the mundane is not exciting or fun for me. I don't
Mhm.
love that. That's where I fall apart, right? So I think it's true of everybody. If you're not growing some, if you're not pushing outside your comfort zone a little bit with business, it gets really stagnant. It's just not that much fun anymore. How I feel. I know a lot of accountants that would disagree with that and say,
Yeah. Well, that's why they're
we did
accountants,
really
and that's
good
why
last
there's
year. We had nothing blow
that's
up.
yep. That's why everyone's got to find their right seat on the bus, right? Because we are all
Right.
not cut out to be doing certain things.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about, within, the painting business and the one day concrete coatings, kind of your ability to grow the real estate, to spend more time, even to transition into now becoming a coach. There are breakthrough. Obviously, you've worked yourself, out of certain roles within these businesses because you're not needing to do those day-to-day operations. But what would you say are some of like the tool or the system or the thing that really allowed you to kind of successfully break out of the hourglass in certain roles?
Well, so if we're talking about the primary tool,
Mm-hmm.
it's been Nolan Services. Summit has been the primary tool to help us identify the things we didn't know, right? Help us to identify where we're getting hung up, where we're getting drugged back into the hourglass, and give us some tangible solutions and management practices on how to get out of that. How to identify talent that can help pull you out of different roles that you get stuck in at every level of the business, right? Like, I mean, early on when I was the main salesperson, I was running all of production. I wore so many hats in the business, and just getting a coach to look at what we're doing and be able to compare that to what other companies around the country were doing and say, if you would think about doing X, Y, or Z, it could get you out of that role some and sort of
Yeah.
push you out of your comfort zone to recognize it. So there's not one, there's always been that goal of creating systems to get out of the hourglass, but it was really the tool for us has always been Summit. I mean, we wouldn't be where we're at without the help of you guys, really just pouring into the business and showing us different ways.
I love that, and we appreciate it. And I promise to our listeners, I did not tee you up for that response.
Anyone that asks will get the same answer. That's the
Yeah.
truth. I tell
I
everybody
was
that.
expecting, a certain tool like a technology or calendaring or something, a certain role you hired.
Those things change. That's the thing. Business is always so fluid. Things change. But
Yeah.
having relationships, coaches and mentors and the network of businesses that you can talk through the problems that you're dealing with or stay to the cutting edge of changes that are happening. There's always improvements that need to be made.
Yep.
But we find and figure out those improvements and how that can be possible with people like the coaches at Summit and
Mm-hmm.
the peer groups and the other people that are doing what we're trying to do. I mean, I've never found a better group of people than just our mastermind group and the folks that you meet when we go to the brand summits and things. I mean, you keep in touch all the time and talk about what you're doing and what you're trying to improve and who's got it figured out best. I mean, that's so powerful. just the advice and the mentorship that comes
It
out of this
is.
group is really incredible.
I've gotten some amazing feedback just from, vendor partners in the industry who have said to me after a grand summit or webinar, just been like, the companies who are a part of the summit group are just next level. They are like-minded. They are willing to share best practices. They are eager to learn. They show up ready to collaborate. And, they don't always see that everywhere. So it's really, we know that because we have been connected with you all for so long, and we, get to know you guys more than just on a regular, the relationships are created year after year. And so, we know that, but for other people to come in and spend 2 days at a conference and see that, come to life without any prompting is pretty cool. So it is very transparent. Anybody who spends time amongst this group, that you guys are some next level business owners, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys have done a fantastic job putting this group together. I mean, you can't minimize your impact in all of this. I mean,
It is definitely a collaborative effort. We think about, the culture of the summit group and the values that we also want, to be alive within this group. And it's not a great fit for everybody, and that's okay. Everybody's got to find what the right environment is for them to thrive in their own, in their business environment, and who's the right mentor or coach for them. We're really lucky that, with the connections and relationships that we've built here. What's pretty cool is that now you are a coach. I mean, the transition from, start growing your businesses, you guys began, Mike's Quality Painting began working with Nolan Consulting Group in 2013. And now here we are 12 years later, and you're now coaching businesses. That's a pretty cool full cycle moment.
It's honestly, it's a bit of a dream for me. I met Steve Talkington at my first ascent in 2013, and listening to his story and then getting to know him a little bit over the years and seeing him traveling around the country and coaching people and running his business from a distance. He, for me, was always like this perfect picture of what I wanted to try and accomplish. Right? Like what a neat way to kind of pull it all together and sort of make it full circle. Like we get so much out of the group, and you spend a lot of time with our peers from around the country. And so to be able to give back to that a little bit and come and coach and work with other people that are trying to figure things out and maybe add value to their situation. I feel like Summit's added so much value to our business and our life. I look back on it and say, my kids owe you guys a debt of gratitude, right? So to be able to sort of be part of that a little bit and on a different side of it is incredible for me. It's really been fun.
What do you most look, I mean, obviously you're working with a couple of clients already, but what are you most looking forward to as you begin to work with more businesses, painting and otherwise? I mean, obviously we work with a variety of industries. What excites you the most about that process?
The growth and transformation, right? When we started with Summit in 2013, I think in 2012, we did about $600,000 in business, I think, if I'm remembering correct. And, over the last 12 years, we've seen tremendous growth, right? And gone through, up times and down times. But that change and transformation and growth has been an absolute, it's incredible to think about, right? It would be fun to see clients do that, right? See people come in that are struggling for this or that, right? They're looking for that breakthrough, that thing that can help propel their business and get them going, and to help them find that breakthrough and then see them carry that through and coach them along the way. That seems like it would be a ton of fun. Just the relationships that you can build and the impact that you can have on other people's lives. I mean, that seems really cool to me.
What do you think, and even just from kind of the peer work that you've done, being part of mastermind groups and just being kind of, you and Miriam are two people who are all kind of always consuming knowledge and trying to learn more about the industry. What do you see as some of the biggest or most common hurdles preventing businesses from getting past certain breakthroughs, getting past that $1 million mark, getting past those big revenue markers?
Yeah, so the one consistent theme that I sort of see come up is people get willing to trade what they say they want, the big goal, for what they decide they want or need right now today, right? So we transfer the goal of what should be out there over a 3 or 4 year mark to, well, I can't sacrifice profitability today. I can't hire that overhead position. I can't think through training and developing this person because nobody gets it. Like we can get stuck in these ruts where we're afraid to invest in our businesses and worried about taking a hit to the bottom line to invest in some overhead. And I mean, you've got to be careful with that. And I totally recognize and respect that you can't just be shooting from the hip, spending money everywhere. But
Right.
strategically speaking, a lot of times the big breakthroughs come when you step back just a little bit and make that investment into that key person or that key thing that's going to help actually get you out of the hourglass. So it's whether it's hiring that first sales rep or hiring a production manager or hiring a general manager at higher levels. As you move through those points, you have to stop saying, how am I going to get this done? And you have to start looking at who's going to do it.
Yeah.
And it really dials back to me always with that who, not how scenario. And that's what usually will cause people to break through and actually get to the next level.
I love that you said that because I feel like that is also a common challenge or struggle that I hear when I'm talking to folks who are interested in working with us, especially those who are, just shy of $1 million or doing a little bit over. They're doing so many things, but they don't know how they're going to afford to hire that operations manager or, production manager or hire a sales rep. And I can say to them that you cannot afford to hire those roles. But it's until working with a coach and they can see the numbers and talking about how they can make this work and what it will actually do for the revenue and how it'll fit into overhead. That's where like the magic happens because they can actually, using the data, using the numbers to really help show how the puzzle all works. And it's not just hiring to hire and there's plan around it. There's intentionality around these hires.
Right. Absolutely.
Let's move into how you maintain, just kind of wrapping us up here. How do you maintain burnout or how do you avoid burnout juggling all of these responsibilities that you have? How do you stay relaxed? What do you do for fun?
Sure. So I guess I should start that by saying this. I really don't work that much. You're going to laugh at that. I do not, people that know me well, I don't work much. I do work out every day. I'm trying to stay active and stay fit. That really helps mental clarity. So I have a gym partner that we meet. Ideally, we meet every day at 10 and work out till noon. So I started blocking that as an appointment about 4 or 5 years ago. And that really helps to clear your mind and to keep you focused. But the reality of it is the biggest thing I do to avoid burnout is to try not doing things that I hate to do. So like I'm a terrible manager. I'll be the first person to tell you, the thought of having to sit and manage 60 people is mind numbing to me. The reviews and the orientations and the day-to-day grind of that is not my sweet spot. It's not what I like doing. And so I tend to avoid it. Miriam is a fantastic manager. She gets so much energy out of, everything that she does around managing our company. If I had to do it, we'd already sold it. I'm being honest. Like I couldn't, it would just feel like pulling teeth every day to go to work. And so I'm really fortunate in being able to identify the things I hate doing and then being able to find people to do some of the things that I don't like. And that really helps keep me engaged and excited about what's going on. And I stepped away from Mike's Quality Painting this year is what gave me ability to be a coach is that Miriam is our managing partner. And so when I say I don't work a lot, I absolutely have zero management duty with Mike's Quality Painting or One Day Concrete.
Wow.
Miriam runs both of those things 100% without me. I haven't been to an all-employee meeting in 2025 so far.
Wow, that's big.
It's pretty interesting, honestly. Like it feels sort of weird, and that's what's driving me towards real estate more. Is I'm like, I need something to do. So we're, me and my brother are buying an apartment complex. I think we're supposed to close on it this week, and so those kinds of things like hunting down deals and looking for things on the real estate side. And so the struggle for me right now is trying to stay engaged enough to feel like I understand what's going on with Mike's Quality Painting in One Day. But I actually have to call in and find out what's going on. Like Miriam and I have scheduled meetings, owners meetings, and she shares the numbers and I sit in on the quarterly management team meetings. But without that, I would be a little bit lost.
That's amazing. I mean, to make that shift, I can imagine, it wasn't an overnight. That probably took time to kind of work through what that looked like. In a broad view, how long did from like the initial direction of maybe that's the way we go to actually transitioning to that? How long did that take?
Well, so the long answer is it took 3 years. 3 years ago, that wasn't really the goal. That wasn't the end in mind that I had in mind, if I'm being honest, right? Like Miriam had been sort of progressing up through our business. She had started out when we started the business, she was part-time because she was raising our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was doing marketing, and she was sort of helping to create paperwork for me. And my mom was running our finances, and I was kind of doing everything else, right? And so then through marketing, Miriam started running our sales team. So she became our sales manager. And then she ran the sales team for a long time and was doing fantastic with it. I mean, Miriam is a phenomenal manager. And so she was managing the sales team, and then she took over managing the front office for my mom when we were in a facility. So she was the office manager and the sales manager, but she always felt a little bit of a disconnect, like she couldn't get involved with production because that was mine. And so
Oh,
it started
interesting.
sort of creating this sort of rift in our company. And so then 3 years ago, I said, why don't we let's quit fighting about sales and production. Let's make you the general manager. And then you
Yeah.
can feel completely comfortable being involved with production and being involved with sales and being involved with office management. And so that's the way that we were working. And last year we were working with Brian. He was our coach. And I think I'm a strong personality. I've never really realized that, but in meetings and things like that, I would
Mm-hmm.
be inviting people to talk about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do things. But as soon as I gave my opinion, I would be like, maybe we should try it like this. Everybody thought I just made a new rule and they had to step in line and follow what I said, which
Oh,
completely undermined Miriam, right? Because here she is as the general manager. And if I'm sitting in a sales meeting because I was still selling and I make a suggestion, then everybody in that sales meeting says, well, Mike said to do this or that.
right.
And I would have weird things like it really hit me last year. I had one of the painters, we were at an all-employee meeting, and one of the painters came walking by as the meeting had finished, and he said, hey, Mike, how's your day going? And I was like, oh, things are going great. How are you doing, Martine? And we talked for a minute, and we went about our day, and that was it. And later that afternoon, Jerry, our operations manager, called and said, what did you talk to Martine about? And I was like, what did I talk? And I thought for a second, I was sort of like dumbfounded. And I was
Yeah.
like, he told me about his day. He told me a little bit about a job he was working on, something he was struggling with. I don't really know. We didn't talk about anything. And he goes, well, he just said that you told him it was okay if he takes off next week, that he was going on vacation. He said he had already cleared it with you. And I was like, I didn't know he was going on vacation next week. What are you talking about? He cleared it with me. So things like that start happening, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not that great at like structured meetings, and there has to be a flow and a chain of command and all of those sort of things. Miriam's really good at it, but those kinds of things were creeping up. And we were working with Brian, he was our coach, and he said, look, guys, these problems got to stop. You guys have like this two-headed monster where it's Mike and Miriam, and you guys keep winding up in the spot where you're battling each other. And if you're not careful, this is going to implode your marriage. Like, you guys need to really think seriously about how you're going to do this. And
Yeah.
so we talked for and he said, I'm going to give this some thought, and I'm going to come back to you guys with some options of what I think should happen. And you guys are going to need to decide, but something's got to change. And so he kind of called us out like that. And so we met again, I think a week later, and he said, here's how I see it. He said, I see either one of you takes Mike's quality painting and one of you takes over one-day concrete coatings, and you guys can manage that way. Or one of you needs to find something else you want to go do. So you need to find a different job. You need to do something else. And we're having that conversation, and I started, listening to it. And I said, well, let me think about what that all means and how that works. And as we talked about it, I talked with Miriam about it, and I'm like, I think you should just be the managing partner. Like, let me just step back, let you take it, you run with it. If you need me, I'm here, but you just take
Yeah.
over as managing partner. Let's do it right. Let's make an announcement and work it right, because that was one of the things we hadn't done as Miriam stepped up as general manager, is we didn't clearly communicate that with our team. And Miriam pointed that out when we were talking last year. And so it's like, if you don't make everybody aware of your intentions and what you're doing, then it can kind of fall apart, right? So we made a big announcement at an all-employee meeting at Christmas that I no longer work there. And so I was like, so if somebody comes to you and says, Mike told me to do this or that, you can smile and say, that's great. Mike doesn't even work here anymore. So now let's have the real process. Let's go through it. And so I
I
kind of
love
gave
it.
everybody permission for that. And since then, I have not gone in for big employee meetings. I'm still around, and
Mm-hmm.
we have a gym at our one-day concrete coatings office. That's where I work out. And so I see those guys a little bit more, but I intentionally sort of stay away and try not to get in the middle of what they're doing with jobs.
What a story. I mean, and I love, I mean, it shows that, like, again, there is lots of conversations, and there is like this evolves over time, how you find kind of the right fit sometimes. And it's listening to others and being open to being vulnerable about the challenges. I'll have to do a whole other podcast with Miriam about now her role as managing partner.
You should, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it sort of, for me, as I'm saying that, it sort of rolls back to what I said earlier of, I want to be a really good partner, right? And so if I'm
Mm-hmm.
screwing something up and I feel like it could cost the relationship, when when Brian said that last year, and he said, you guys are going to implode your marriage, it hit me like, okay, that's not an option. Like, we've got to figure
Yep.
something. And because to me, the relationship again matters way more than the business or the work or money or anything else. So if I got to step back and bow out and say it's yours, run it, no problem. We'll find something else to do, and we'll make that really work. So I'm super excited about coaching. I mean, that's honestly, of everything I'm doing right now, coaching is the thing that I get the most excited about. With my clients, I'm like reading through their numbers and thinking about what I think they should be doing, and then trying to figure out how to pull it out of them. And coaching calls, like, that's
Yeah.
energizing. What I mean, that's really fun. And so I love that stuff. There's always something else you can do. I don't have to hold on to Mike's Quality Painting, or one day it's in great hands. Miriam's doing a fantastic job, so let
I
her do
love
it.
that. You have such a great mindset about all of this. And you just said one thing that I think speaks so wholly as to why you are a great coach. And it's about, yeah, you're reading the numbers and making, thinking about what a business should do, but you're trying to pull it out of them. You're trying to help them see how they can grow and how they can create strategy. It's not just Mike telling so and so exactly what to do every time. It's a conversation, but part of them is getting them to is helping them get there.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. I'm somebody who cares deeply about their success. But I'm not an easy button, right? You have to solve your
Yeah.
own problems. I can
Mm-hmm.
I can help you see some other options or some other ways to think about the problems you're facing. But it's through facing our problems and learning from our mistakes that we grow, right? You don't want to rob somebody of that. That wouldn't be ultimately caring for them.
No. Well, Mike, we're thrilled to have you a part of the Nolan Consulting Group coaching team. It's very exciting for us. I mean, and I love the place where, your businesses have gotten to, and Miriam taking kind of control and being managing partner and allowing you to explore this next chapter and really continuing to live your entrepreneurial spirit and helping other businesses build theirs.
Thank you. I really enjoy it, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I always say to guests of mine, I hope this isn't the last time that we podcast. We should get you on in a year or two after you've been working with some other new clients, and just, how your coaching has evolved the more that you kind of see different aspects.
That sounds fantastic. I'd love to be on.
All right. Until next time.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.